We are privileged to have Dr. Bruce Latimer for our Darwin Day program. Dr. Latimer is the founding director of the Center for Human Origins and professor in the Department of Anthropology at Case Western Reserve University. He's also a founding fellow in the Institute for the Science of Origins at Case, and he holds an adjunct professor positions in the Department of Cognitive Science in the College of Arts and Sciences and in the Department of Anatomy in the Case School of Medicine. He also holds adjunct positions in the School of Biomedical Sciences at Kent State University. And he is the adjunct curator at the Cleveland Museum of Natural History, where he served as executive director and CEO from 2000 to 2009. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Dr. Bruce Latimer.
Well, thank you. Thanks so much. Can everyone hear me? I want to make sure about that. Happy birthday, Charles Darwin.
Yay!
He doesn't count past 203 years old. And I'm going to be talking about it. A lot of what, indeed everything I'm going to say tonight can be distilled into what Darwin told us. In my opinion, what he told us is the most important idea that any single individual human has ever had. And if you don't think so, the way you view your universe is a totally different way than your great-great-grandfather did, I promise you. And that's all because of Charles Darwin. So, I'm going to talk about what he tells us about our own species. Because I'm going to tell you something, we are very peculiar. We are bizarre animals. If there's ever a extraterrestrial that comes down and they send their biologists down to Earth and they take a look at us, they're going to say, yeah, there's a weird primate down there. There's a weird great ape, and it walks on its hind limbs. That's weird. And just think about it. No other mammal walks on its hind limbs. We're the only ones that have ever done it. And what good is it? Ask yourself. The fastest human on the planet Earth, a guy Bolt, and he's fast. Oh man, is he fast. In a 100-meter dash, he can actually reach 26 miles an hour. 26 miles an hour. And do you know that he reaches out about 75 meters, and after that he's decelerating. He can't maintain 26 miles an hour. And think about this. Can he catch a house cat? Can he catch a small dog? Can he catch a squirrel? They call us man the hunter. What are we hunting? Slugs? Yeah, slugs, because we can't run quickly. What happens if you hurt a foot? We've all seen three-legged animals, three-legged dogs. They can run reasonably well. Which reminds me. Three-legged dog walks into a saloon. Walks up to the bar. And he says, bartender, I'm looking for the man that shot my paw. You get to use that, right? Anyway, we're the only... Does anybody have a laser pointer? I neglected to bring one. But that's okay, we can still work on this. I just show this because we're the only mammal, we're the only animal that we are aware of in the universe that can begin to ask questions about who they are, where they come from, why they look the way they do, why they suffer from all the things they suffer from. And there's a huge amount of things that we suffer from as a consequence of standing upright. Which tells you, first of all, evolution is indeed a tinker. It can't invent new things. It's got to take what it's got and tinker with it, which means you have a whole series of issues. Humans are the only animals on the planet that spontaneously fracture hips, that have prolapse of the uterus, prolapse of the bladder, prolapse of the rectum, that have hernias, that have varicose veins, that spontaneously fracture vertebra. I mean, I could just go on and on about this stuff. It kind of makes you want to go back on all fours. But these are all things that we suffer from that no other mammal does. Oh, I forgot about osteoporosis. We'll talk about that. So look at these mammals. There's one weirdo. And it's not the fact that they're carrying Kalashnikovs. The point of the matter is they can carry Kalashnikovs. You're supposed to walk like the other guys on 4 limbs. You would never, ever mistake these two. From a mile away, you would not mistake these two. And it's not because the one guy has argyle socks on. Camels don't wear socks. It's because he is standing upright. It's, human walking is another thing. If you take a blind child, blind children will not stand up unless they're taught to. They will crawl. They will crawl for their whole life. So it's a very unusual type of locomotion. We really don't learn how to do it until we're, I don't know, 8 or 9 years old. In fact, our body hasn't even adapted to how we do it until we're 8 or 9 years old. Which means that there's a whole lot of learned behavior in walking. Imagine this. If you have a close friend and you're across a football field, you can tell your friend by their gait. You can tell a very close friend by the sound of their gait. Do you know how weird that is? You can't do that with any other animal, which tells you there's a huge amount of learned behavior in walking. What's the other thing? Well, this is what humans love to talk about. Oh, we've got the big brains. Okay, we walk upright. Yeah, but we got these big brains. You just love that. We do. We've got the largest brains on the planet relative to our body mass. The second smartest animal is right above us there, the chimpanzee. We've almost quadrupled the size of a chimpanzee's brain. So we do indeed have a pretty reasonably big brain. And of course, tool use is a consequence of the big brain. We're the only animal, well, we're not the only animal that uses tools. A lot of animals use tools, but we're the only one that has complex tools. And I show this because I threw this one in just for tonight. This is the plaque that they put on the Voyager spacecraft. And you know, Carl Sagan was involved in all this. And the idea being that the Voyager, which is now further out in space than any machine that we've ever sent out, they thought, and it shows, there's the trajectory, it slingshots around Jupiter and it heads out into deep space. And there's the pulsar, so whoever finds it can triangulate off the pulsar, and they can figure out where our solar system is. Now you can see the solar system. I'm not so sure this is a good idea. I'm not so sure that the North American natives were waving flags with the Spanish ship. But at any rate, it's out there. With the idea being if someone finds it. Now I want you to take a look at those two weirdo animals. They're standing on 2 feet. That's odd enough. But here's another thing. NASA always, and still does, it always has its hand out to the government. Because that's who funds it. So NASA is forever coming up with these ideas, some of which are just ludicrous, but nevertheless, it's, they do that. So NASA took this thing and they took it to show it to Congress. Number one, they ran out of money. It was meant to be solid gold. Well, they ran out of money, so it's aluminum coated in gold. Which is interesting because if people find it, they're going to say those humans are sure as hell cheap. Better than that. Now, some of you are too young to know, but some of you aren't. There was a congressman from North Carolina, and his name is Jesse Helms. Jesse died not too long ago. And Jesse Helms, they don't make right-wingers the way they used to. Jesse Helms makes Rick Santorum look like a Bolshevik. So they showed this, and I love this. I mean, you guys are free thinkers. This will tell you what happens if you're not a free thinker. Jesse Helms said, and I will quote, he said, "I will not be a party to the pandering of pornography in space." And so, anyone that found it, they're going to say, there goes the neighborhood, the humans are here. Because look how naked and everything. And I'm going to tell you something else that got even better. Jesse made such a stink about this, that if you look at that man, you can see his hand, okay, and then whoever finds will say, that's a manipulatory organ, we got that covered. And they're going to see his legs, and they're going to say, yeah, okay, he's locomoting on that. But then they're going to look at that thing hanging down from under his belly, and they're going to say, well, he's not walking on it. And it doesn't look like he's grabbing anything with it. But the point is, look at the female. Jesse made him change the female anatomy so it's not accurate. We sent up an inaccurate description of our own species because Jesse Helms thought it was pornography. Unbelievable. But you know what? Remember, all those guys standing up there running for the GOP presidential candidate? When they asked him, how many of you believe in evolution? How many hands did you see go up? When they said, do you believe in global warming? How many hands did you see go up? One of these people could potentially, God forbid, end up as our president. Okay, happy birthday. This is a birthday boy. As I told you, everything I'm going to tell you comes from this guy. And when I read his work, it fascinates me just how brilliant he was. He wasn't wrong very often. And when he was right, he was very right. He told us, if you want to understand human evolution, go to Africa. And I want to tell you, I love your t-shirt. We are all Africans. I wanted to put a sign like that up in the museum and just say, everybody that goes in there, I want them to walk by the sign that says, we are all Africans, and that is absolutely so. And we should all know that. And Darwin said, go to Africa, and he did it on the basis of comparative anatomy. And he looked at these guys, and these are the 4 great apes. And that's, you can tell the human, I don't have to point that out to you. But the next to the human is a gorilla, and then a chimpanzee, and an orangutan. And those are what's left of the 4 great apes. And he knew from comparative anatomy that we're closer to a chimpanzee. He knew that. That's amazing. I could take that chimpanzee and I could put him on a table in Case Western in the medical school, and do you know that those students could use their Gray's Anatomy and their Grant's dissectors and they would never know the difference. That's how close we are. Incidentally, you remember Roy Chapman Andrews? Some of you will. He was, the guy that they used for Indiana Jones, but he was a real guy at the American Museum. When he went to Asia, to the Gobi Desert, he went there looking for hominids, for human ancestors, because God knows we couldn't have come from Africa, it's much too primitive. So he said, let's go to Asia. They didn't find any. They still haven't found it, and they won't. But they found dinosaurs, and they're still pulling dinosaurs out. Now we can take comparative anatomy to the level of this stuff, DNA. Now this is amazing. Everyone in this room is 98.5% or 0.6%, 0.7% identical to a chimpanzee in your DNA. That's amazing. In fact, we're closer to a chimp than a horse is to a donkey. We're closer to a chimp than a lion is to a tiger. And I know some of you are going, wait a minute, a horse and a donkey, you can create a mule, And a lion and a tiger, you can create a liger. Yeah, you can. Does it mean you can create a human and a chimp cross? I'm not suggesting you do it. But can you do it? Probably you could. Which would make a great novel. And you name the kid Link. I get part of the royalties. Okay, so meet your first cousins. That far on your right is a pygmy chimp, and the one towards me is a common chimp. These are your first cousins. But yeah, I watched when people walked in here. I didn't see anybody knuckle walking. Nobody's got the big canines like a chimp. So there are differences. As close as we are in a genetic sense, there are major differences between us and chimps, which is a very interesting problem. But how are we going to figure out how we got to where we are today? Well, you can't do it in a biochemical lab. We push that as hard as we can. You got to go find the fossils. And that's where I work and where Johannes Haile Selassie works and where Scott Simpson works. We work in the Horn of Africa and Ethiopia. And the reason that you work in Ethiopia, in the Horn, is if you look at the Gulf of Aden and the Red Sea, those are 2 big clefts in the earth, and what's happened is they've been filled in with seawater. Coming down the eastern coast of Africa, you've got the Great African Rift. And Somalia is moving away from me, the rest of the continent is moving towards me, so eventually that will fill in too. But the point is this, is that not only do the animals that we're looking for live there, but you can find them. And you can find them because of the exposures, enormous exposures. So it's like a giant Grand Canyon that opens up all of these sediments that otherwise would be buried. As an example, some of you here know very well, Cleveland is famous for a particular fossil. What is it? Yeah, well, it's a big placoderm fish from the Devonian 360 million years ago. And what's it called? That's right, Dunkleosteus. Has anybody here ever found a Dunkleosteus?
Yeah.
Well, there's always somebody to ruin it. No, you have. The point is, you have to go to river cuts. And that's not enough exposure to find much of anything. They found most of them following the bulldozers on I-71. But we can be very proud of those because if you go to Paris, you go to London, they always have a ductilossus there. It always says, from Cleveland, Ohio. And this just shows the famous sites. The site of Hadar, where Lucy's from, the site where I work in the Middle Awash. And you come down, and on Lake Turkana, there's the site of Kubi 4, where Richard Leakey and Eve Leakey work. So they all cluster up and down the rift. And this is what it looks like. When you're at the top of the escarpment, you're up about 11,000 feet. It's cool, it's wet, very nice. Not bad at all. Then you jump in your Land Cruiser, and you bump down for about a whole day. It takes a whole day to get down to the basement of the rift. And when you get down, it looks like this. One of the hottest places, most inhospitable places on the planet. This is down about 1,000 foot in elevation, and during, well, around noon, it averages about 120 degrees. But it's perfect for finding fossils. When you get down there, there's this pastoralist group, these guys, the off-our tribesmen. There's one who's a member of the Natural History Museum. There's one who's a Clevelandian Yeah, I'm just going to tell you, see this guy, he doesn't have a hat, but he will get one, and I'll tell you why. Look, what they do, the men do this, the women don't. The men take goat grease, and they put it in their hair. And the reason they think it looks aesthetically pleasing, and maybe it does, I don't know. That's not why they do it. The reason they do it is it's so hot that the goat grease is white, and my guess is it cools them off. But if a guy like this, when you turn your back and he takes your hat and puts it on, he keeps it. So how do you find fossils where there's no divining rod? There's no trick. Some people are very good at it. Johannes Haile Selassie is very good at it. Probably the best in the world. But you walk and you walk and you walk and you stare, hoping to find something coming out of the wall. Well, you find it on the ground and then you can follow it back up and you hope you can find it where it was coming out. And you find lots of this stuff. This is an elephant femur, about a 4 million year old elephant femur, thigh bone. You find lots of those, and because they're so big, the hyenas can't process them. And if you go to the Serengeti plain, you find lots of these big bones even today. That's a giant pig, about the size of a horse. They're important because they allow you to biologically date the site, so you're constantly checking on what your dates are. And this is important. The bone on the top is a 4 million year old river otter. The bone on the bottom is a modern day river otter. Now, I just showed you that desert, and it is a severe desert. Do you think that a river otter the size of a black bear could live in a desert? Probably not. And that told us humans are not adapted to the savanna. No, we've all heard the savanna theory of human adaptation, and I never understood it. It never made sense when they told me as an undergraduate that somehow, it comes out of South Africa, incidentally, somehow there's a patch of trees over here, and there's a patch of trees over here, and you run out of food in your patch of trees, and you got to go to the other side. So what do? You stand up and walk upright? So every animal, every predator can see you, and you've lost your ability to run fast, so they'll eat you? That is ridiculous. Anyway, we now know we are adapted to this. A constant supply of water. Because if I took one of you, and we should have known this, if I took, and you can tell a human, you can tell how well an animal can concentrate urine by the length of these things called loops of Henle in their kidneys. Well, if you line up the mammals, the greatest urine concentrator of all is the desert rat. And they don't even drink water. They get enough water out of the leaves that they eat. And when they urinate, it's a paste. That doesn't sound comfortable to me. But anyway, they can do that. Well, if you line up animals like that, on the other end of the spectrum, of course, you got things like otters and beavers and that kind of stuff. You know where humans are? We're between pigs and beavers. We can't concentrate urine. We can't. I mean, how many, anybody who's ever drank a beer knows that. So that we're adapted to constant water. And if I was, I'll take a volunteer here. If I was to take one of you, and I put you in a closet, and I lock the door, and I turned the thermostat up to about 110, and I waited for 3 days to open the door. When I opened the door, it wouldn't be pretty. What kills you? I know you're going to say heat stroke. Everybody, let's drop it down. What ultimately kills you, though?
Your gases?
No, what kills you is you cool off by sweating. Sweating's a weird way to cool off because you lose your fluids as well as your electrolytes, but you lose all your fluids. And by cooling off by sweating, if you don't replenish it, what happens is your blood becomes so viscous that your heart can't push it and you die of heart failure. That's what kills you. So are humans adapted to live in a desert? No. And 3.2 million years ago, and one of our ancestors was killed by a leopard, taken into a tree, which died from the hyenas, and wasn't consumed. Fell out of the tree and fell into a braided stream like this. And that's what it looks like today. And who do they find? The most famous fossil of all time, Lucy. Again, we can all be proud it was the Cleveland team that discovered Lucy. Why is Lucy important? Well, she's important because look how much. We have a shoulder, a complete shoulder, we have a complete elbow, we have a complete hip joint, we have a sacroiliac joint, we can mirror image the knee, we have a complete ankle joint. For the first time, we could start doing mechanical studies that we just couldn't do before. How old was Lucy? Well, geologically, she's 3.2 million. Biologically, we can even make an estimate. And that's because if you look at the teeth on the far side, the one towards the bottom is the third molar, the wisdom tooth. Jump up to the next one, that's the second molar. Jump up to the first, the next, the third in line, and that's the first molar. The first molar is already worn through the enamel, and it's very thick enamel, into the dentin because of the abrasive nature of the food she's eating. The second molar is also polished, but the third molar has just erupted. It's not even polished at all. So Lucy's an adult, but a young adult. So you could call her 20, maybe 22 years old. How'd she walk? Because ultimately that's the thing. How does, if an animal, if you have a primate, and the primate walks on 2 legs, you've got a human ancestor. Because no primate that we're aware of has ever walked on 2 legs other than our immediate ancestor. One of the things about walking on 2 legs is when you're doing it, you're standing on 1 foot at a time. We're not hopping, we're not saltatory bipeds like kangaroos. So you're on 1 foot at a time. In order to stand on 1 foot at a time and not fall over, we have become the most knock-kneed mammal on the planet. No other mammal has its knees closer together than its hips. We did that to get our foot under our center of mass, which is the middle of our body. So we've become knock-kneed. And there's all kinds of clinical problems with this. Women, because they have broader pelvises than men do, which is another weird thing. I could sex 100 pelvises from across the room, and I'll bet you I hit 99 out of 100. You can't do that to any other mammal. Their pelvises look the same, but humans, because their brain's not too big, we had to change the female pelvis. Well, females have a wider pelvis, so they have a greater angle to their thigh bone, and that means that the big muscle in the front of the thigh, the quadricep, that pulls on your kneecap, that muscle wants to dislocate every time you take a step. You know what that happened. So there's all these adaptations, and all of a sudden, you know what, my daughter, who was a wonderful swimmer, truly a great swimmer, a state champion level swimmer, she started dislocating her knees because of flip turns. And that ruined her career, because she was dislocating her knees because of this problem. But at any rate, so we can look at Lucy, and we can see that it's a fossil in the middle, how it slants out to the side, and the human on the left, how it slants to the side, and the chip over there goes straight up, which is what all, all of mammals do. So if your dog goes out the back and digs up a bone, and you look at it, you say to yourself, gosh, this looks like a thigh bone to me. I wonder. Well, you take that thigh bone and you put it on the table, on the dining room table. If it goes straight up, you're okay. If it goes like that, call 911 because you have an issue. Where'd Fido get that anyway? Oh, it's the quiet guy next door. No, it's the quiet guy. We also have her pelvis. That's her sacrum in the middle and then her hip bone on the side. So we have a sacroiliac joint. Sacroiliac joints are important because in humans we don't fuse them. Other mammals fuse them. We can't fuse them because our brains again got too big and blah, blah, blah. And that's a terrible place of pain, sacroiliac pain, that particularly pregnant women have because we had to keep it mobile. Well, we mirror image that Lucy's pelvis, and on the top is a chimpanzee, and on the bottom is Lucy. They don't look much alike. Now, I'm going to tell you something. If I was to ask people in this room, define a biological adaptation, an evolutionary adaptation, I'm sure some of you could reach back to those, back when you were in college, or if you're in college now, and you could say a biological adaptation is anything that any behavioral, anatomical, or physiological characteristic that increases the reproductive fitness of the animal in question in a given environment. What the hell did I just say? I'd give you the A if you said that. You'd get the A. But you know what I just said, really? No, biological adaptation is anything that lets you live long enough to have babies. That's all it is. Because if you don't live long enough to have babies, you go extinct. And Darwin so Darwinian fitness is described in how many offspring you have. That's the current. And having said that, look at the difference between these pelvis. That's Lucy on the top and a modern human on the bottom. They look a whole lot more alike. But having just told you that, let's think about the human pelvis. It's a compromised adaptation because it's a locomotor adaptation and an obstetric adaptation. And those of you that have taken human anatomy, nobody likes working on the pelvis. I'm going to tell you why. It's just crowded with stuff. Inside of the pelvis, you've got a rectum, you've got a descended colon, you've got a bladder, you have a uterus if you're female, you have a prostate if you're male. That place is just packed with stuff. So you don't willy-nilly go changing things around from what we just saw in a chimpanzee-like pelvis to one that looks like a human. You just don't do it for fun. You just don't move things around. And it causes all kinds of trouble. I mean, our heart, the human heart, sits right on top of our diaphragm. That's weird. Every breath you take, your heart goes up and down, up and down, up and down. It doesn't do that with the hands. So we've got all these strange things. Why did we do it? Here's why. In a quadruped, the big muscles of the hip, and I'm going to have him, work at a museum and talk to little kids. I'm going to tell you something. If you're just talking to third graders or fourth graders, you can say, what muscle is this? No, why would they know? They're only third grade. What muscle is this? They don't know. What muscle is that? They don't know. If I slap my wallet and I say, what muscle is this? 50% of those third graders scream, gluteus maximus. And they ain't talking about a Roman gladiator. It's gluteus maximus. You know what? That doesn't tell you much about human anatomy, but it tells you an enormous amount about human behavior. I'm serious about that. Humans have really big butts. And they play a big role in our life, in your behavior. You may not think so, but trust me that they do. Well, gluteus maximus and the other guys, gluteus minimus and medius, they come down, they attach on the femur, and they pull when they contract, because muscles can only contract, they extend the leg, and if the foot's on the ground, the arm goes forward. That's a galloping complex. Look what happens with us. We twisted the blades around. Maximus is still back here doing the same old thing. But we've twisted the pelvis around so the gluteus minimus and medius, the little guys, are now on the side of our hip instead of being behind it. And that means we can abduct. We can move our leg like this. God. Did anyone do that today? Unless you have a peculiar dog-like habit, you probably didn't. Nobody does that. But every anatomy text that you will ever read, ever read, and you go to, you do what everybody does when you learn muscles. You have a 3x5 card, and you have the name of the muscle, and its origin, and its insertion, and its innervation, blah, 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 so you can memorize it. And then it says function. And it says gluteus minimus medius function, abduction of the thigh. Yeah, it's true. It's true. I have to give them the A. I have to give them that. I can't take that credit away. But do you think you went to all the trouble to go changing your internal organs around and changing your pelvis around so you could do this? Not likely. You did it because it allows you to stand on one foot and not fall over. That's why you did it. And we've all seen people that have damaged that muscle, the nerve to that muscle. And I'll tell you how unfortunately what happens. Because they did something really stupid. They didn't put on their seat belts. And if you don't put on a seat belt, and God forbid you hit an immovable object like a tree in your automobile, your car stops. You have a lot of momentum, you slide forward and your knee hits the dashboard. Well, you probably lose a patella, but that's okay, you can win with that patella. But if you tear, all that force comes up the leg, if you tear the nerve that goes to those muscles, you can't stand on one foot. What happens? You'll fall over. And those are the people that you see walking like this. It's called a Trendelenburg gait. And they damage those muscles, so that's how important they are. And with Lucy, we can see Lucy walked like a human. She was able to balance. She had her knees were like a human. She could stand on one foot. She had the abductor complex in her hip. Very different from that chimpanzee that has to lean over. That chimps have a Trendelenburg gait. They have to lean over their foot. Well, it turns out that the hyenas like to eat those muscles, but then they stop. They don't chew up the rest of the hip. This is the proximal hip. This is the ball and socket portion of your hip joint. So this is the thigh bone, upper thigh bone. And we've got a bunch of them. And these are all about 3.5, 4 million years old. So you think to yourself, what are we going to do with all these? Well, the first thing I did is I got a poor man's CAT scanner called a bandsaw. And I took humans and I sectioned them right through the neck of the femur, and then so we could see what it looked like. And the important thing here is look at the one towards me. See the white bone? That's cortical bone. That's the hard stuff. That's the ivory-like bone. The cortical bone is thick on the bottom, thin on the sides, and really thin at the top. Inside all that lattice work, that's called trabecular bone. That's sort of joint bone. That's not very strong. Well, I did the same thing to a chimp. The chimp is on your right. The cortical bone in a chimp is a thick donut of cortex, a very, very strong bone. So you think, why did we go from that to this nightmare? Well, I couldn't cut them all up, so I CT scanned them. There's a human. It's 100% diagnostic. You can't miss it. Thick at the bottom, thin on the sides and the top. That's a chimp. Can't miss it. But that's not enough. We had to figure out why it occurred. What is it that why did humans change ours? And we had a fossil that was broken in just the right place. And that is on the far side, there's the fossil broken through the neck of the femur, and it's exactly like a modern human. That fossil is about 4 million. So it's a very early adaptation. Well, we modeled the femoral neck as a, if you want to be fancy, a cantilever beam. Well, a cantilever beam only means a diving board. So if the your body weight comes through the hip joint, that's the big arrow, and the wall is the shaft of the femur, and the neck of the femur is the diving board. And if you want to break a diving board, where do you go? Do you jump up and down by the wall? No. You get as far out as you can. It increases the bending. But that made no sense because, let me just back that up. Can you see the little arrows in the middle on that? When you put something in that position, the material, the tissue at the top gets pulled. Think of a diving board again. When you bounce on a diving board, the tissue, the material at the top gets pulled under tension, and the stuff at the bottom gets pushed. It's under compression. And for those of you that care, the dotted line through there is the neutral axis. Well, didn't I just tell you that the thinnest bone in the human femoral neck is at the top. And here's a little biomechanical truth, there aren't many of them. Cortical bone likes to be pushed, but it hates to be pulled. It's like concrete. That's why they don't make suspension bridges out of concrete. Because if you start tugging on concrete, it comes apart. But it likes to be pushed. Well, so does human bone. All mammalian bone. So that is exactly the opposite of what you would expect. Well, we forgot our friends the muscles. Gluteus minimus and medius. And when they contract, they neutralize all the forces on the top of that bone. So it is, the system works. This is just another way to show that. But as you age, your muscles get weaker, you've started to lose bone mass, and I'll talk about osteoporosis in a minute. You lose bone mass, and all of a sudden you do this. This is a hip fracture. In a hip fracture, you don't break your hip, you break your femoral neck. And look where, this is called an intertrochanteric fracture. It broke right where the diving board meets a wall. And that's unique to humans. And I hate to say this, even today, a third of the people that do this will be dead within a year. It is a devastating problem. It's becoming, as our demographics get older, it's becoming more and more. It's a terrible thing. And I'll tell you something else. You might have noticed that I have a little hitch in my gait. I've got an artificial hip because I didn't break it, but I was well on my way to breaking my hip. So I had to go with titanium. So I'd say get rid of that cartilage and bone stuff. Go with the good stuff. Okay, now we're looking at the pelvis again. On the top is a human, bottom is a lucid. And we're looking from the head down. That big hole in the middle of the pelvis, that's the birth canal. And of all the things you can play around with in evolution, the one thing you don't play around with is the birth canal. Because that's bad. Well, look how the human is nice and round, and it should be round, because the fetal head, the fetal skull, is a little round sphere that you're trying to push down this tube. So it should be round. Look at Lucy, she's wide from side to side, but from front to back, really narrow. In fact, if you were to measure that, and there's an index you can use, she's called hyperplatypelvic. And she would be, in today's society, an obligate cesarean section. Well, now, they weren't doing a lot of C-sections 3 million years ago. So you got to ask yourself, what is it telling us? Well, it's telling us something. And it's telling us that they had tiny brains. Our ancestors, Australopithecus, Lucy from the neck down looked like us. But from the neck up, she didn't. She still had a chimpanzee-like brain. And I showed this. This happens to be a monkey. But it doesn't matter. It could be any. It could be a bear. It could be a dog. It doesn't matter. The head of this animal is towards me. The caudal vertebra of the tail. That's the pubic symphysis in the front of the pelvis. And that's, you see the big arrow? That's the birth passage. Now, I just want you to think about this. So here comes that little fetus, and it comes down here and it goes, woo, right out. There's a great film from the Cincinnati Zoo. They had a pregnant chimp. They didn't know when she was going to have the kid. But luckily, one of the visitors there was filming the chimp, and she's walking across her cage, and all of a sudden she goes like this, whoa. And there's the kid. I will promise you no human female on the planet will ever just go, whoa. And this is why. You want a nightmare? Look at this. There comes a kid with his big brain. It comes down and slams its head onto the pubic bone. It then flexes its neck and slams its forehead into the sacrum. And then it has to do a complete flip. That's the most gymnastic thing most people will do in their life. You know, I gotta tell you, I've only watched it once with my daughter. It's a horrible experience. I'm gonna tell you a quick story. My wife happens to be a midwife. Works at the Cleveland Clinic, and she's a midwife, so she catches babies all day long. One of the things that happens in humans is because it's so difficult to get the kid out, there's a hormone called relaxin that the female releases this hormone, and what it does, it makes the ligaments flexible so you can have, the pelvis gets wiggly, so you can get the kid through it easier. Now we came up with a little experiment, and that was this. This was when she first found out she was pregnant. And that is that relaxin makes all the ligaments and all over the body get relaxed. So we measured her fingers, how far she could extend her fingers, just with a protractor. And the idea being that when she was in labor, we would measure them again and see if they went further back. Right? It was an experiment. It didn't work. Because then I went up there with my protractor and she's sitting here in labor. I'm not going to tell you what she said. But it wasn't, let's complete the experiment. It was not that. So we never did it. Anyway, so Lucy, from the neck down, looks like us. If you saw her across a football field, you'd think it was a little kid. However, when you got close to her, she would have a face and skull that wouldn't fit. So the brain came late. In the old days, this is a one mistake darn babe, but I never hold him. I don't hold him up for this because he didn't know, he had your data. The idea, he said, was, here's how it worked. You had a chimpanzee, a genius chimp, had a really big brain. Okay? And the genius chimp figures out you can take two rocks and knock them together and get a sharp edge. Okay? Because remember the three things? You got tools, you got big brains, washing. You got tools, you got big brains. Here's another thing, another third thing. Oops. You guys see that? That's incredible. Anyway, so they got these three things. So he put them all together and he said, here's what happened. They're making these tools and then then the tools get more complex, okay? And then you start a feedback loop. And the brain gets more complex and tools get more complex. And pretty soon you're carrying around all these damn sharp rocks. And you got no pockets or anything, so you got to stand up to carry them around. And then they get more complex and on and on and on, and pretty soon you're launching space shuttles. Well, it didn't happen that way. We've been walking upright for at least 6 million years, and the brain didn't budge until 2.5 million. So the brain is the new guy. Now, I just want to talk a little bit, if you want to see if there's anything that tells you, we've all heard of the idea of intelligent design. Intelligent design. What a concept. If you believe in intelligent design, get a new engineer. Because I told you that evolution works with what you got. And the human spine is probably the most poorly engineered, no, not probably, it is the most poorly engineered part of the body. This is the birth canal again. I'm not worried about birth, other than to say, look at the sacrum. The sacrum is the bottom of your spine where it meets your pelvis. And the sacrum in humans is horizontal. Now that's not the way you want to build a backbone, but we had to do it because if you turned it vertical, which is in an engineering sense what you want to do, then you'd block the birth canal, and you can't do that. So we have a sacrum that is horizontal. But you can't have it horizontal because your head will be sticking out here and you'll be walking around like this. So we had to do something that no other animal's ever done to create the hollow in your back. It's called the lumbar lordosis. No other animal has that. And that allows us to stand up over our hips. And this isn't so much about birth other than when in the third trimester, when the fetus has gotten big enough, it moves the center mass of the woman in front to the front because of the fetus. And what do you do to balance? What do women do in the third trimester? They lean way over like this. They create a hyperlordotic curve and they waddle like this. Well, they're not doing it for fun. They're doing it because they're trying to balance over those hips. And it causes terrible pain. And the sacroiliac joint and all kinds of issues. I hear a lot about this in my head because my wife's an advice. She's got all kinds of sneaky tricks that you can do to help these people. And we had to change the whole anatomy of our lower back to do it. If you're out in the field and you find a couple vertebrae on the ground, you can tell immediately if you have a human ancestor or not, because of these certain pieces of anatomy. That happens to be a 3 million year old back from South Africa, and it already shows the things that we've done. And basically what you do, you take the joints in the back and you make them come down like this, almost like a pyramid. And they do that because that allows the joints, when you go into that hyper extension, allows the joints to slip by each other. They don't crash into each other. Unfortunately, two of you in this room don't have adequate separation between those joints. I'm sorry, it's just that you were developmentally got a bad card. And here's what happens. If they're in the same plane, that's the sacrum on the bottom, that's the fourth lumbar vertebra with a big arrow pushing down, which is your body weight. If they're in the same plane, the joints come down like this and they literally break the back off of the fifth lumbar vertebra. It's called spondylosis. Okay, well, here's what it looks like. It breaks it. It literally breaks it. This happens in probably 5 or 6% of the American population. Now, when you're young, you don't even know it, because it's held in place. Even though it's lost its bony horns, it's held in place with ligaments and muscles, and you're fine. But do I have to tell the people around here, other than the young ones, that when you get older, everything just goes to hell? And the ligaments get weak, and the muscles get weak, and it ain't pretty, folks. So what happens then? This is what happens. And this is serious. What happens is because the sacrum is nearly horizontal, the body weight vector, the body weight comes down vertically, so it takes your lax lumbar vertebra that is broken at the top, and it starts to push it into your pelvis. This is called spondylolisthesis. Why do they have these tongue twister words? I don't know. Spondylolisthesis is very bad. I mean, when your spinal, when your vertebral column starts to slide into your pelvis, that can ruin your day. And the worst of it is, there's a hook where the nerve comes out, the nerve root, the fifth lumbar nerve root. And as it starts to slide forward, it tugs on that nerve. And number one, that's exceedingly painful. And two, the fifth lumbar nerve goes to areas in your body that you don't want to have go bad. So this is really difficult to try to fix. They try to fuse it. It doesn't work very well. This is unique to humans too. No other mammal comes even close to this. And it's all a consequence of our standing up. Another thing, because we put all those weird curves in our spine to balance. I mean, if you think about your dog or your cat, they just have one nice gentle curve. We've got curves going back and forth like this so we can balance it. Well, that means that when you put loads on the human spine, there are hot spots. And it makes mechanical sense. The most fractured vertebra in the human spine is T8. Is the 8th thoracic vertebra, and that's that long line there in the middle of that curve. That's because it's in the middle of the curve. And when you push on a curve, that gets the greatest amount of bending. So T8 fractures a lot. And when I show this to, oh yeah, sure.
I crushed 3, 4, 5, and 6 T almost 28 years ago.
Your thoracic 3, 4, 5, and 6, how'd you do that?
I was trying to save someone from trying to kill himself that big jump, and I got in the way.
Hey, well, I hope you're okay.
I'm in severe pain pretty much all the time now. I've gotten over it and everything.
Well, I trust
But
you.
it healed slightly crooked.
Yeah, well, it would. Their vertebral fractures, there's not much you can do about it. Well, look, watch what happens here. So these are, we just went through the collection of 3,000 skeletons and counted the fractures, and this is what it looked like. Well, then we went through the same collection and we CT'd them to measure bone density. Look at this. This is amazing to me. Over here are the apes, and over there are the humans. So on the x-axis, how old the things are. We didn't know how old the apes are, but we seriated them by dental wear. And those are Hounsfield units, but this means density. The higher you are on that, the more dense the bone is. Look at the apes. They don't lose any mass. They don't lose bone. Look at the human. We drop off like crazy. You peak out in human bone mass about age 25 or 30. And after that, man, it's over. And then what happens is in women, because they have menopause, and you know no other mammal has menopause? No other mammal undergoes menopause. That's an odd thing too. Anyway, we undergo menopause, which means that your ovaries don't produce estrogen anymore, and when they don't, you're still stealing bone out of the skeleton, but you can't put it back in. So the whole ratio goes awry, and the bones get weaker and weaker and weaker. And that's, you can see in humans, that's a precipitous drop. Now we take this and superimpose it upon that curvy spine, and this is what happens. That's the wedge fracture. You can see the one that looks like this, just been crushed in the front. That's a T8, the 8th thoracic vertebra. Do you know what? I'll tell you something. When I talk to clinicians, I can't tell you how many times they say, wait a minute, I've never even seen a T8 fracture. And the reason is this, if this happens, it hurts for a couple days. It hurts badly for a couple days around your ribs, like this. But what happens is that it resolves and nobody ever goes to the doctor. Although they should be x-raying these. If somebody goes in for osteoporosis who's 70, 75 years old, they should do an x-ray of the mid-thoracic column to see if this thing's in there. Because here's what happens. Age 60. Menopause happened 10 years ago. You've lost enough bone that you break those guys in the middle, that T8, T9. That means then you change the natural curve of the spine and you start putting more load on the ones under it. So then you break T12 and L1, lower button. You're not quite lower, in the middle of your back. And then a decade after that, you've lost enough bone that you break the guys at the bottom, which is L4 and L5. And that's why women lose height, and also why their body shape, the profile of their body changes as a consequence of osteoporosis, of this age-related bone loss. There's not another animal on the planet that does anything even remotely like this. This is just weird. And then finally, herniated discs. I can tell you about herniated discs. If you live long enough, you're going to herniate a disc. And the thing you're looking at the top, you're looking down on a vertebral disc, and the white bands around it are holding the jelly. The jelly is the nucleus, the pink stuff. And imagine this is a weak old jelly donut. If I put a weak old jelly donut here, and I went like this, you know that jelly's coming out somewhere. And it's going to come out in the weakest spot. And unfortunately, the weakest spot is, see the blue thing? Those are nerve roots. That's your spinal cord, and those are the nerve roots. When it comes out, it pushes on a nerve root. And that can be excruciatingly painful. And if you live to be 80, guaranteed you'll do this. And then finally, something like this. This is scoliosis. Just god-awful. Only humans get scoliosis. We don't even have an animal model for scoliosis. It turns out if you take a chicken, and you take out its pituitary gland, it might develop scoliosis. Who the hell came up with that? But it's a chicken. It has nothing to do with us. But humans do this all too often. And this is why young girls especially, when they're in middle school, will go to the nurse and they make sure that they're not curving too far to the side. This has nothing to do with backs. It just tells you that you're over the hump. Okay, I'm going to go through this quickly. This just happens to be a cat. It could be anything. The problem is, other animals use their shoulders to absorb energy. If you took a Clydesdale horse, now I don't know how much a Clydesdale horse weighs, probably a ton, I guess. I mean, they're big. And you accelerate them to a full gallop. I don't know, 35 miles an hour, maybe, I don't know. Anyway, when that horse jumps up and comes down on its front hooves, and I know they're huge hooves, I know, the ground reaction coming back, the force that's hitting that ground is enormous. It's giant. And remember, conservation of energy, it just doesn't go away. Where does that energy go? I'll give you a hint. Why do you sweat when you run, and why do you sweat when you exercise? I mean, you say, because you get hot. Well, that's not really why it happens. But you do get hot. That's a good point. But you got all this energy floating around that you got to do something with. Well, what you do, you use your muscles to take, your muscles are like springs. They take up energy mechanical energy and they turn it into heat, and your body can dump the heat on it. When that horse runs, it's the shoulder that takes it up, and you can see it here in the cat. This poor devil has trouble because he's concentrated all the load on one foot at a time, because he's totally given up his shoulders. We can't use our shoulders to you make a difference. So we've had to make all kinds of adaptations in our lower limb to try to stop from ending up with arthritis in our legs. And some of you that have arthritis in the knee, if it was premature arthritis, it's probably because you were hitting the muscles that should have been absorbing it, weren't taking it up. Let's forget this, that's too... So we have all these things. One of the things we have an arch to our foot. No other animal has an arch to its foot. And the human arch is there because we've taken all those little muscles on the sole of your foot. And I'm telling you, medical students hate the foot. They just hate the foot. I'm kind of insulted by that. They hate the foot. And the reason they hate it is because you've got more muscles in the sole of your foot than you have in the palm of your hand. And with your hand, you can do this. You can't do that with your feet. So what are all those little muscles doing in there anyway? Well, when you step on your arch, it allows those muscles to take up energy. And that is a shock absorber. It's unique to humans. Of course, it has problems like fallen arches and all kinds of problems. Hallux valgus and bunions and all those things are a consequence of that. And I can tell you why it works now physiologically, but you know what? The Greeks knew it. The Romans knew it. The Babylonians knew it. How do we know that? Because they said, just like they say today, if you have flat feet, you can't join the infantry. Because you will literally break the bones in your foot. Because you don't have that shock absorber. This is just a human heel bone. It's filled, again, it's filled with all that weak bone. It has very little cortical bone in it. And that's just part of the shock absorbing mechanism too. If you've ever broken your heel bone, it's probably the most difficult fracture to heal. A difficult fracture to set because it just explodes when it breaks. This is the ankle bone, shows the same thing. So we've changed our entire skeletal structure as well as our muscular structure to allow us to walk upright. So how long have we been doing this? Well, these are the Laetoli footprints. They're from Tanzania, discovered by Mary Leakey in the late 70s, and they're right on the edge of the Serengeti Plain. And this is, in my opinion, the greatest fossil find of all time. 3 of our ancestors walked across a plain with volcanic ash. The volcanic ash had come down, and the volcano is still there. They walked across that. Then the volcano erupted again, covering those, and they remained covered. They're at 3.5 million years old, and they remained covered until they were discovered. But look at this. See the little ones on the far side going right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. Then a bigger one walking behind that one, and then a third individual walking and stepping in the bigger one's prints. And that's not unusual. Watch people when they are walking in snow. If someone's walking in front of you, you will naturally step in their footprints rather than make your own footprint. And that's what we see there. And fortunately for us, human footprints are so easy to recognize. Nobody has a foot like this. If you do, you're not a human. Every other primate does, because if you're climbing trees for a living, you better be able to hold on to the branches. One of those is not a human. If you can't tell, leave your shoes on. Incidentally, that's a gorilla and a human. You have no idea how hard it was to get them to sit down next to each other. And there's one of the footprints. This 3.5 million years old. There's a big toe that's in line with the rest of the foot. There's an arch. You can see the arch that's there, and you can see the heel stripe. So that, you would lose that on a modern day beach. Just a fantastic fossil. So here's an artist's rendition of what it looked like when our ancestors were walking across the Serengeti 3.5 million years ago. And incidentally, there are not just human prints. There are giraffe prints, there are elephant prints, there are guinea fowl prints, there are rabbit prints. There are prints all over this place. And just by luck, and I'll tell you, you know how they found them? This is an amazing thing. I love this about science, the serendipity of science. They were there looking for fossils. Now, when you've been out in the hot sun for all day, and, you know, I'm not kidding, it's 110 or 115 degrees, and you're tired, you're exhausted, you eat bad food, the water smells funny, everything's weird. But you do it because you want to find the fossils. At any rate, on Mary Leakey's team, when you're walking around, I know you do this for some reason, entertainment. You can find things like giraffe pies. Let's call them a pie, a giraffe pie. And a giraffe pie is big, it's like this. I mean, it's big, and it's sitting out there in the equatorial sun and gets very dry. So what you do, you can take your hands and you can lift them up like a big frisbee. You can, and then you throw them at your colleagues. Yes, you do. I've been hit by plenty of them, but I've got them back. So this guy was picking up a giraffe frisbee, and he looked under it and he saw a footprint. And he said, God, that's a human footprint. That's how he discovered the lactose footprint. They had no idea that anything would be like that. But they discovered him picking up a frisbee. So now we're leaving footprints all over the place. And what a long, strange trip it has been. All right, I'm sorry I went a little late. I apologize. I'm happy to take questions.
I was fortunate enough to take myself to Africa, Kenya, Tanzania. I saw the spot where the first human was found by Louis Leakey. You're not mentioning, you mentioned Mary, but not Louis.
Oh, you're talking about Old Gorge?
Yes, right.
Yeah. Well, actually, Louis did discover that. Mary discovered that one too.
Okay. Well, what about, see, I never saw the footprint display.
You're not allowed to.
Oh, there you go.
And the reason is they're so delicate.
Incineration.
That what Mary did is she reburied them. Because you're out in the middle of nowhere. So she reburied them. And then she put rocks on top of them. Well, I mean, nobody knew this was going to happen. When you put rocks on the top of them, then the Maasai cattle can't get in there and eat the acacia bushes when they start to grow. They would normally trim them. But when you put the rocks there, the cattle can't get in there, so the acacia bushes are growing, and the big taproot, being a desert plant, the big taproot is going down into the footprints. So the Getty Institute got a bunch of experts, and I'm very fortunate to be invited on this. I was able to go for 2 years, and we re-excavated the footprints and remeasured them and photographed them and everything. And yeah, ideally, you should make a museum of it, but you're in the middle of nowhere, and it's Tanzania, they don't have any money, and the Maasai don't have a clue what's going on. Okay, so they're reburied now, so they can't see them.
Okay, thank you.
It's too bad, I wish we could.
So with all the terrible design, do you think in time are humans still evolving to the point where there'll be a better machine?
No.
Why not?
Because in order for us to change further, you have to have people that have more, it's more offspring. And with modern medicine, many of these things, most of these things occur after your reproductive life is over. So it's invisible to natural selection.
So since we have enough offspring to keep our species stable, we won't evolve? That shuts off the evolution?
We're just living too long. Essentially, once again, ask the question, why do we have menopause? I don't know. We're living too long, and that means that if these things hit you at age 60, it doesn't affect your reproductive fitness. It's over.
I got you.
So,
So evolution's only concerned about the reproductive time period.
That's all they care about. All it cares about is how many babies you have.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Cats are said to have floating clavicles for
Yeah.
shock absorbers. Did gorillas and any of the other apes have the same thing? And if so, did they kind of fuse together once we got upright, or?
No, that's a good question. The clavicle, what do they call it? Collarbone. They're right here. In humans, you can feel those things. Cats, in fact, most mammals have greatly reduced the clavicles. They don't need it. But as primates, when you're climbing, what happens is when you reach up and grab a branch and you pull yourself up on the branch, if you didn't have a clavicle, what would happen is your shoulder blade would crunch into your body. So primates have clavicles. It's primitive. It's a primitive thing to have. But all primates have clavicles like we do. There's something called aclavicular, where certain people are born without clavicles. This is, and and I've seen photographs of this, they can take the tips of their shoulders and they can go like that and touch it in the midline. So your clavicles are strapped to hold your arm out so you can climb.
But do all quadrupeds then have a floating clavicle? So
Most of them, some of them don't, like horses don't even have a clavicle. And cows don't have a clavicle. Most of them lost them. But cats have a small floating one in there, but it's on its way out, or was on its way out. So it doesn't function much as a clavicle, but all primates, like us, have clavicles. Okay, I'm going to tell you something. Oh.
Just to let you know, I fell head first.
Oh.
But
You are lucky.
I was, thank you. I was wondering, and forgive me for bringing this up. I don't recall what you said, because I was told Louis Licky discovered it. Mary did. Where
Mary
does
did.
Louis guy come from?
Well, Lewis was Mary's husband.
Oh,
So what happened?
man gets stuff.
Well, I'll tell you what happened, and we actually have Lewis's diary.
Huh?
He was sick. They've been digging old mine ores for, God, I'm sorry, 2 decades. Because Lewis was obsessed that they were going to find a human ancestor. And there's all kinds of things that he did that he got, people laughed at him all the time, and nobody gave him money. And he, they were tired of drinking water that tasted like hippo urine. His first wife left him, and then he finds Mary, who was an archaeologist, so they're working up down to Olduvai. Lewis is in his hammock, sick. He has a fever, probably malaria. So Mary went out in the Olduvai Gorge and walks up the gorge, and damn it, she doesn't find a fossil skull eroding out of the side of the gorge. So she runs